Hello, I'm going to show you some common mistakes that students make in their academic writing. This will not only help you with research papers, but it will help you with all kinds of writing. Okay, these are student examples, and they are for the reading questions from the nonfiction book Better by Atul Gawande. This is the first example. Okay, the question asked about professionals forming a personal value system. So one thing that this example does that is good is it has a topic sentence. A personal value system is important in every profession, and a medical practitioner isn't the exception. That's a very good topic sentence. A lot of times students forget to have topic sentences. They just launch right into some summary. And summary isn't the goal here. It is to talk about the topic at hand in a big picture, to analyze it, to talk about the importance and significance of it. Yes, you'll have some summary in it, but very little. Okay, sometimes students say, but you're telling me to write in third person. That means my opinion isn't allowed. That's not true at all. That's not what writing in third person means. It just has to do with point of view. It doesn't have anything to do with whether you're expressing your opinion or not. In academic writing, you express your opinion through third person. There are some technical things, mostly technical things, that I'm going to be showing you in this podcast. One of them is how to set the margins. And it doesn't have anything to do with turning things on in the learning management system, but this does have to do with word processing. So you can see here that the margins are too large. In MLA and APA, you're supposed to have 1-inch margins. So you can set them here. You can see the default is 1.25, but it should be just 1. So you can do it this way, or you can do it by moving it around with these little cursor handles at the top. Make sure that your ruler is always turned on. Okay, moving on. Here I wanted to point out that this is not a good way of integrating quotes. The previous sentence says, similar to Gawande's position of a personal value system in an intimate level, it should be on an intimate level. Loyalty is embodied within an employer and employee on a business level. That doesn't quite make sense, but that's not the point I'm making here. Washington Post writes, I didn't know that newspapers could write. People write them, but newspapers don't. So it should be in a Washington Post article. Now, the Washington Post is a title of an entire work. It should be in italics. Parts of works, such as articles from journals or articles from newspapers, go in quote marks. Okay, again, can't write it. And if the author is unknown, that's fine, but it looks to me like the author is known, although it's not down here in the secondary sources, so I'm confused. Oh, okay, here's Morning Views. All right, Jake Flanagan is the author, so it's very clearly there. In a Washington Post article, Jake Flanagan wrote, in these you can use past tense, when business owners enter the public marketplace, they should expect to follow laws with which they might disagree on religious or other grounds. Okay, so then a new sentence starts here. Clearly we need a period at the end of the sentence there. And it wouldn't be Morning Views, it would be Flanagan. So you would never use a random bit from a work cited. You always use the first word or words. And if you know the author's name, it's always the author's name. However, in this case, the author's name isn't needed because I added it into the sentence. Always use page numbers when you know them. That's always the first choice. But if you have to use paragraph numbers because you don't know the page numbers, it looks like this. Okay, again, there's a similar mistake here. Also be sure when you're citing summaries or paraphrases that the periods go on the outside of the parentheses. Wanted to reiterate here that this is not how to format a works cited entry. You do it this way. First line is flush left and all lines underneath go underneath. It would also be double spaced in a real document. Okay, moving on to the second example. Now this first sentence you can see is all in green, and there's a very good reason for that. It says, as read before, diligence is the necessity of giving sufficient attention to avoid error and prevail against obstacles. Okay, the first thing that's wrong with this is as read before. Who's doing this reading? The necessity? It doesn't make any sense. So this is sort of a weird remnant from writing in first person. The student may have written, I have read before that diligence is, but this is not first person. Probably what this should read is, Gwande defines diligence as. And another thing I need to say about this is that the citations always go at the end of the sentence, not randomly in the middle. Even when the quote ends here, it still goes at the end. In MLA and the APA, I know for sure. It goes at the end. They don't want the citations junking up the middle of the sentence. Here's an example of a random fragment. For example, when the doctor starts yelling at the woman who does not allow Pangjaz to give the drops to her children, that's an incomplete sentence. It's just a subordinate clause there. Okay, there is a separate lesson on matching pronouns and nouns, but doctors is plural here, there is plural here, which is right, except for this should say patients. It's plural. Just like the polio operations, many doctors have to have diligence and have to be aware of what they are using and doing to their patients. Doesn't quite make sense, but I wanted to point out the pronoun antecedent matching. Okay, here is an introduction of a secondary source here. In the article, Bad Medicine Sneaking In, Gwande describes. Okay, that's a good introduction of it here. A time when, time is when, not where is a place, he was accused of placing a fake mesh into a patient recovering from a hernia. Okay, so down here, there is a quote from that source, but it's just been dumped in here. Who's speaking? We know it's Gwande from reading the context above, but you can't do that. You have to put in who is speaking. This is a signal phrase. Gwande asked, or commented, or whatever is appropriate. Okay, now we have lots of problems. Here is a random comma just stuck at the end of a sentence. You should have learned comma rules by now, and you know there's no rule for that, just randomly sticking in a comma here. I put one here because this is a signal phrase and only stands in for a signal phrase, not just randomly placed at the end. So that needs to come out. And then the second problem with this is it's just the title here. First of all, a title that's part of a whole work needs to go in quote marks, and that is true in the citation. But the only reason you would use the title is if you didn't know the author's name and it were listed in the Works Cited page by the title. So if this were going to be in the citation with the title, it needs to be in quote marks. Secondly, I insist on all of my students using page and paragraph numbers for all citations. Again, if you don't know the page number, use a paragraph number. If it's just one paragraph from a web source, that's fine too. But I want you guys to be in the habit of doing that. So I just randomly guessed this page. It's from a newspaper, so that's not quite what it would be. However, here we have to have his name, Gwande. Bad medicine. That way we know it's from this and not from better. But if you're going to use two by the same author in the same paragraph, here it's just Gwande, but we wouldn't know what it was. Better would have to go in there with a comma. Okay. I also want to point out the structure of an academic paragraph. And I want you guys to work towards commentary and analysis and not just summarizing the readings. So have a topic sentence. Tell us what the paragraph is about. Now this is a summary of the reading. In this chapter, better, this would be an introductory phrase. That's the comma rule that's being used. Gwande tells the conflicts that result when intimacy is challenged during physical examinations. Well, this doesn't quite make sense either. Is intimacy being challenged? No, it's not. So be very careful about how you're expressing yourself. It's almost funny. Another problem here is there's no comma between the name and the page number. Used to be the case many years ago, like 25 years ago or something. MLA had a comma there. And if you learned that in high school, it may have been from an older instructor who hadn't bothered to update his or her knowledge. Here we have Gwande, New York Times, and that was a good attempt at indicating it wasn't from better, but it needs to be the title. The surgeon's notes on performance has to go here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. A bad medicine sneaking in has to go here. Okay, finally, we have another one of those dangling metaphors. In a blog that writes on diligence. Gosh, I didn't know that blogs could write. That's a very talented blog. So, as you can see, it's anthropomorphizing something that does not write. So, in his blog, Dr. Kareem, in his blog on diligence, Dr. Kareem supports the encouragement of diligence, would be what it needed to have. Also, using one is still the same as writing in first person. By using the index case as an example of poor diligence, one can see, and in this particular answer, this student used one again and again and again, and that's just substituted and disguised first person. It's not necessary, this one seeing things. So in third person, this would be the index case, an example of poor diligence, which demonstrates that diligence should be important and natural. Okay, I hope these things help. You can always ask me questions, as you know.